Welcome to the Energetically You podcast, where we will be talking about healthy habits, abundant mindset, and optimal wellness. I'm your host, Megan Swan, creator of the Sustainable Integrated Wellness Approach. At 30, I sold everything and went on my own eat, pray, love journey, if you will. And now, at 41, I'm still on my first stop here in Mexico, loving life and feeling more energy than ever before. This podcast is for ambitious women who are looking to level up their energy so that they feel happier and more productive throughout their day in all of their projects and passions. Inside, we are going to be talking about ways to truly tune in to our minds and bodies in new ways to leverage our natural energy sources. So let's dive in. Hello and welcome back. Today I wanted to touch on a controversial topic, which is mommy wine culture. I have had a dramatic shift in my perspective on this topic in the last several years. At the beginning of motherhood, I was full on one of those mommies who, I wouldn't say didn't leave a day without wine, but it was definitely a very strong narrative that it was the main way to relax and unwind at the end of my day was that glass of red. So I wanted to touch on this subject because I feel like it is a growing discomfort. There are growing movements of sober, curious women in general, not just mothers, but I feel, and albeit maybe it's because I exist now in the sober movement and sober world, that it seems like it's growing, but I'm quite convinced that it is. And I know over time it's going to be even more impactful as women come to understand, get informed, hear a different narrative, see a different narrative as more and more moms speak out about the fact that they live a sober life happily, in fact, even happier. In my case, I'll only speak for myself, but I know for most women, it is life-changing in terms of their overall physical health, mental wellness, and ability to cope. Really, it is a mechanism that society, but really an alcohol industry has sold us the idea that it is empowering, it is relaxing, it is even self-care to have a glass of wine or three at the end of your day. So there are really a lot of sub issues here. I'm going to keep this podcast in particular a little shorter, but here's what I wanted to touch on. First, a few resources that I highly recommend if you are sober curious. There is a great amount of sober literature, as they refer to it. Many, many women inspired to tell their stories. Really, I found in the beginning of my sobriety, it much more, it was like a support mechanism to sit with these other women and their stories and know that I wasn't alone. And in the last several years, I haven't been as pulled to them. But one book that I think was pivotal for me in making the decision, I won't say it made the decision. In fact, I had already made the decision and it just helped me be more firm in my decision. But anyway, the book is called Drink. The subtitle is The Intimate Relationship Between Women and Alcohol. It is by Anne Dowsett Johnston. I believe she's Canadian, but her story is like many, I find, of these sober literature stories. Hers is a bit more weaved with facts in terms of she's a reporter. And so she paints the picture of how the relationship with women and alcohol has changed over the years, and a little bit of the backstory there, which for me was really important. It was important for me to understand that I didn't come to that place on my own, that alcohol is a not only totally socially acceptable, like recommended tool to help you parent, or to help you get through the harder stages of parenting and or sleep deprivation. And in fact, so anyway, let's go a little bit into the history, because that's one thing I wanted to touch on today, because I think it might be really informative for some of you that are considering changing your relationship with alcohol. So right when I'm 41 and I started drinking quite heavily, arguably as of 17, pretty much end of 17, right into 18. And it was right at that time, so that would have been the 90s, that the sort of mid 90s, that big alcohol, as I like to refer to big alcohol, big tobacco had faced a serious blow in the courts, where they were now forced to put a lot more information on cigarette packages. They could no longer sell or actively target ads at adolescents or children. And there were a lot of places in our society that they could no longer even advertise. So that's when you stop seeing, I believe in Canada, for example, you won't see like a billboard of cigarettes. I think I have seen that in the United States, but point being, there was a huge shift in society's perspective in terms of how healthy or not that bad smoking was. So there was like direct ties between smoking and cancer. And that greatly shifted the amount of ads that big tobacco was putting out. And so the high-powered ad companies went looking for new clients, and one of them was big alcohol. And one of the conclusions that they came to was that there was this huge untapped market, i.e. women, i.e. half of the market was not being targeted as well as it could be. So enter Mike's Hard Lemonade, enter wine coolers, enter all sorts of alcohol labels, wine labels, targeted more to the female eye, if you will, this much different aesthetic. And also a deeply embedded and strategic ad campaign that involved social media, that involved, our favorite television dramas. All of these things were starting to weave in a message that powerful women drink, corporate women drink, that we as women, it's like our right to drink, that it's ladylike, that it's, it's like part of being a woman. And it just became really just a part of our culture in that moment. And coincidentally for me, at me being 40, my generation saw the first of that. So that isn't to say that mothers for generations before haven't been self-medicating a little bit with all sorts of things, right? But the message that it was okay, that everyone's doing it, that it's socially acceptable, that it's desirable, that it's cool, the whole mommy juice, there's there's different narratives. They're not all around wine, but I think that is the stronger one. And that's certainly the one I see in social media the most. And I think it is worth, digging back. Like, do you remember what were you first drinking and buying into? Which narrative exactly? What are your favorite television shows that have power women? And, how much is drinking a part of that show? Where else are you maybe consuming this message that you need wine in your life to parent or to manage stress? If you're not a parent and you're just a woman who is, pretty much all women, we are caretakers, right? We are holding space. We are being of service, if not to children, maybe to parents, living for our career and needing an outlet for self-care, for stress management. That is undeniable. I'm not at all suggesting that that we need something, but I am suggesting that you reconsider that it needs to be alcohol. And in fact, alcohol is probably just setting you back. So what else did I want to say? I wanted to talk about the labels issue. So I personally don't have any problem saying I was an alcoholic. I am an alcoholic. I was an alcoholic. I had a drinking problem. I don't mind those labels. And I personally find that using them sometimes just makes the conversation shorter when people are challenging me on why I'm not drinking. However, I will side note there. I will point out that it was surprising to me. I thought like a big reason in my mind I put off quitting drinking was that I thought there would be this social blowback, and there is a social blowback, but it's not what I thought. I thought it was going to be more personal. It would be more consistent, like an ongoing thing. And in fact, maybe speaks to how much I really needed to quit drinking, in that most of my close friends and family, after I said no thanks to an offer to have a glass of wine with them a couple times, and there was no challenging as to why, no jokes about me being pregnant. And I think it was just understood. And so, definitely interesting that alcohol is really the only drug that we have to rationalize to other people. We have to defend ourselves as to why we're not consuming it. But I digress. The point I was trying to make is that sometimes people get caught up in these labels. Like, I'm not willing to say I have a drinking problem, or I'm not willing to admit that I'm an alcoholic. And I invite you to consider that you might not have even a drinking problem, but you could benefit from reevaluating your relationship with alcohol. And, just checking yourself, tracking yourself, and noticing, maybe being a little bit more observant for a couple weeks. What is the aftermath? What are you feeling the next morning? Not only maybe a headache or whatever, but, what are you craving? What are you then relaxing all your rules on? Are you less motivated? Do you tend not to go to the gym, or then not work out as hard? Or, because in my experience, it was, there's one conversation around the damage the actual alcohol is doing to your system. And that is a real conversation that needs to be had, I would argue, more often. I point you to an amazing article. It's now a couple years old, but it still is relevant. I'll put it in the show notes, called "For Women, Heavy Drinking Has Been Normalized, and That's Dangerous." This was back in the Washington Post several years ago, but I reference it quite a bit, even with my clients, because it talks about, and I believe Anne talks about it in Drink as well in her book, this sort of tragic reality that many women are very seriously, our health is affected by the alcohol consumption, and it is not a widely accepted or discussed topic. Women still, one of the leading killers for women certainly in my age category and above, is heart disease. And the number one risk factor for heart disease is alcohol consumption. It definitely impacts your risk factor for type 2 diabetes, obesity, and both of those are diseases that sort of are domino effect diseases, meaning you get one or both and you are on the fast track to a whole other list of chronic diseases. So I think, sort of lost my train of thought there, but my point was that that's just the physical. That's just the physical conversation. And more I'm optimistic because I feel like there's a growing conversation around the mental wellness aspect of consistent wine consumption. So, there's always a conversation about, there's all these studies that a glass a day, is good for you. Well, first I would argue, like, how big is your glass? And second, I would argue, do you really just have that one glass? And be honest. And then also, lastly, there, I would ask you to really delve into who paid for those studies that came up with the narrative that a glass of wine a day is good for you, that is good for your heart even, because it's a very dangerous narrative, I would argue. So I think back to the mental wellness or health argument is that you can't really be aware of how dramatically it may be impacting your mental health and wellness unless you take it out of the equation for a little while. And sometimes we think we know things based on an experiment we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Basically, your body is an entire different body every 7 years. You're constantly replicating cells. And I know the women that have had children will tell you and agree that they feel like they have a completely different body after giving birth, whether that's hormonal, whether that's in terms of your weight, the shape of your body, your mindset, your outlook on life, your perspectives, all those things. An experiment that you did 5 or 10 years ago may not hold true today. So I invite you to just try it. And the more that you resist that little suggestion, like go 7 days, or, you'll get a way bigger measure going a month, but go 7 days without alcohol and see how much better you sleep. Are you more patient? Is it easier to meditate? Is it easier to get up and work out? Do you feel like you have more time to do things that you may have been wanting to do for a long time? Are you just like in a better mood? Are you craving all the things that you're usually trying to avoid or not? All these things can shift dramatically when you take that one thing out of the equation. And I'll just speak in my personal experience. Basically, I feel like I have up-leveled my whole life, my mindset, my physical health, my strength. Everything has exponentially increased since I quit drinking. And, I'm not perfect at all, but I have started running since I quit drinking. I have ran several half marathons. I ran a marathon. All these things I wouldn't even consider thinking that I could attempt, let alone do. And it was all within a year that I started running and then ran my first marathon. So now my perspective on what's even possible for me physically and mentally is so much stronger, so much more positive. I grew up as sort of this, I feel like I had this dark cloud that was following me, and I played into it, and that I was sort of like the bitchy, jaded, funny girl that all the popular girls loved telling their stories to, their problems, looking for advice. But, I was never the popular girl. I was the popular girl's sidekick or confidant. And, I managed that with dark humor and jadedness, and alcoholism really played into that. And it served me. And that was for me one of the really important realizations. I was listening to a podcast. It was Dr. Gabor Mate. He's an expert on addiction. He is a professor in Vancouver, and I was listening to him on a podcast. He has several books. Any one of them I recommend if you, again, are living with someone with a serious addiction, or maybe considering yourself reevaluating. There are really great books. I'll link the podcast actually that I listened to, because I listened to this podcast on a plane ride home, and I kind of already decided, but I literally decided in the air before I arrived in my home city that, yeah, this is it. I'm quitting drinking. I'm ready. And what he said was he's works with heroin addicts, but he talks a lot about his own addiction to his work and how it has impacted his relationship with his children and his wife and his life in general. And it just hit home when he said, you can't move on from the addiction until you thank it. And like, you have to bring it in closer first and like give it a little love and appreciation for how it did serve you. Like it must have served you at some point, or you wouldn't have started and maintained it for so long. And so that really spoke to me. And, so I took some time to reflect that it served me. It helped me through getting over the death of my father. He committed suicide when I was 17. And, I think I maybe never entirely got over my parents' divorce, which was years before that. But, I managed everything, like everything is tickety-boo. I'm totally fine. Nothing phases me. That's the kind of kid I was. And, I don't think any kid is really like that. We all are deeply emotionally affected by big changes in general, even if they're positive, and certainly big negative changes in our life, like a death in the family or a divorce or moving. And so all of this became a coping mechanism, partly for my sadness around these things, and then later also for managing social situations that I didn't feel equipped for. And yeah, full story, or, full circle. I won't go over my whole life and all of the drinking ebbs and flows, but I think my point here is just take a moment and reflect on what how it served you and what is it doing in your life at the moment? Is it really serving you? And if you were really resistant to the idea of just trying 7 days without alcohol, I invite you to dig deeper there as to why are you so resistant to going 7 days? And whatever the length is that you think is like impossible, that's probably how long you should go before you're really going to get some meaningful answers. But there are so many resources out there right now. I obviously am, deep in the recovery and sober movement, and I see it growing. And I just, so encouraging to me, all of the women that have come out, stood up, that openly talk about their sobriety. And particularly, to me, there's sort of, two main stories. Of course, it's like a huge generalization, but there is the like hit rock bottom, which I found a lot of the sober literature are women that hit like a deep rock bottom before they got themselves out of it. And it's more of like how they rebuilt their lives. And then there are a lot of women that are like, you know what? I just not enjoying alcohol anymore. Going to give it a break. And they give it a break with, maybe they put a date on it first, maybe they don't. And they just never go back. And then thankfully they speak out and say, you know what? I haven't been drinking for 3 years, 10 years, 6 months, whatever it is. And I don't really miss it. I certainly don't miss it in the ways I thought I would. I have so much extra time. I am so much more productive at work. I'm more patient with my loved ones. I feel like a deeper sense of connection with everything in my life. I am more in tune to my body and my mind, and I have found a mindful practice or a spiritual practice, and I am so much more content, relaxing at the end of the day with a kombucha or a soda water or a chai tea, and having like a deep heartfelt conversation and remembering it 3 or 5 days later. And it's just a shift that for me was life-changing. So I wanted to share that with everyone. And if I said something that resonated with you today, wonderful. Please reach out and tell me about it. So I will be in touch. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for listening to Energetically You. I hope that this episode has helped you to tune into your natural energy sources so that you feel more energized and focused throughout your day. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to help more ambitious women just like you accomplish their goals. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it on social, or in your Instagram stories, and tag me at Megan Swan Wellness. See you soon.